Prophecy Decoded. Decode the past, reveal the future.
What if I told you that Iran's next military move against Israel was written down to 500 years ago, hidden in ancient Hebrew prophecy that most people have never truly understood? Tonight we're about to unlock a prophetic revelation so precise, so earth-shattering, that it will change how you see the current Middle East conflict. The ancient Hebrew prophets didn't just predict the future, they gave us a roadmap to the end times that's unfolding right now before our very eyes. The Hebrew Israelites have been guarding this secret knowledge for millennia. Picture this scene from Ezekiel chapter 38, verse 2. The prophet sees a vision of Gog, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal, leading a massive coalition against Israel. But here's what will blow your mind. The Hebrew word Rosh in this verse has been mistranslated for centuries. Modern scholars now recognize that Rosh refers to Russia, Meshech to Moscow, and Tubal to Tobolsk. We're not just talking about ancient geography here, we're looking at a precise military intelligence report written 25 centuries before it happens. The Hebrew Israelites have always understood something that mainstream Christianity missed. They've recognized that biblical prophecy isn't just ancient literature, it's a living document that speaks directly to our time. When we examine the archaeological evidence from sites like Mount Ebal, where a 100 BTH curse tablet bearing the sacred name U was discovered, we see that these prophetic texts have deep, historical roots that connect directly to communities who have maintained their Hebrew identity across millennia. But here's where this gets personal for every viewer watching tonight. The Merneptah stele from 1208 BC, the earliest non-biblical mention of Israel, proves these people existed exactly where and when the Bible claims. Recent DNA studies from Kiryat Yearim show genetic continuity between ancient Canaanites and modern populations, including communities that identify as Hebrew. This isn't just about heritage claims, it's about understanding that God's prophetic plan encompasses all nations and peoples who recognize their calling. The controversy surrounding Hebrew Israelite identity has obscured a crucial, whether through communities reclaiming their biblical heritage or Ethiopian Jews returning to Israel during Operations Moses and Solomon, were witnessing the fulfillment of Jeremiah, which speaks of God gathering his scattered people from the ends of the earth. The Beta Israel's immigration to Israel in the 1980s and 1990s literally fulfilled Sev. Al 11, which mentions gathering God's people from Cush, the ancient name for Daniel's vision of 4 empires in chapter 7, provides the framework for understanding our current moment. Babylon, Persia, Greece, and Rome rose and fell exactly as prophesied, but Daniel's prophecies extend into our time. The Cyrus cylinder from 539 BIS confirms Persian policies that allowed Israelite return, validating Daniel's historical accuracy and lending credibility to his end-times vision. When we see Iran, the modern successor to ancient Persia, positioning itself against Israel today, we're watching Daniel's prophecy unfold in real time. The Dead Sea Scrolls, dating from the 3rd century BC to the 1st century CE, preserve Hebrew Bible texts that include specific prophecies about the gathering of exiles and the role of nations like Persia in end-times events. These ancient manuscripts, discovered in Qumran caves, confirm the consistency of biblical transmission across millennia. Recent analysis of scroll authorship reveals complex redaction processes, suggesting multiple contributors preserved these prophetic texts with remarkable. What prophecy comes next? How does one verse change everything we thought we knew about this war? The verse that changes everything appears in Ezekiel 39:2, where God declares, "I will turn you around and drive you on and bring you up from the far north and lead you against the mountains of Israel." This isn't just poetic language, it's a precise military description of how Iran's assault on Israel will unfold and ultimately fail. The Hebrew word shub used here means to turn back or return, suggesting that Iran's attack will be redirected by divine intervention. Archaeological evidence from Assyrian campaigns in the 8th century BC shows similar patterns of northern powers attacking Israel, providing historical context for Ezekiel's prophecy. The prophet describes Gog of Magog, identified by many scholars as a coalition led by a northern power, which aligns perfectly with Iran's current geopolitical position and its alliances with Russia and other nations hostile to Israel. The timing couldn't be more significant. But here's where Hebrew-Israelite understanding becomes crucial. Communities that have maintained their connection to biblical prophecy recognize that Ezekiel 38 and 39 aren't just about military conflict. They're about God's plan to reveal himself to all nations through Israel's supernatural deliverance. 16 specifically states that this battle will happen in the last days so that the nations may know me when I am sanctified through you before their eyes, O Gog. The genetic evidence supporting Hebrew-Israelite heritage claims adds another layer to this prophetic fulfillment. Dana studies reveal that Ethiopian Jews share significant Middle Eastern ancestry with other Jewish populations, supporting their oral traditions of descent from the tribe of Dan or from the time of Solomon and Sheba. The genetic markers aren't just statistical curiosities, they're biological threads connecting modern Ethiopian Jews to the ancient biblical world. Recent studies from Kiryat Yearim have revealed genetic continuity between ancient Canaanites and modern populations, including some African groups. This discovery challenges traditional assumptions about ancient population movements and suggests that the biblical world was more genetically diverse than previously understood. The implications for Hebrew-Israelite communities are profound, as these findings provide scientific support for claims of ancient Middle Eastern. The Lemba tribe of southern Africa presents another fascinating case study in genetic heritage. DNA analysis has revealed the presence of the Cohen modal haplotype in their population, a genetic marker associated with Jewish priestly lineages. This finding supports their oral traditions of descent from ancient Jewish communities and suggests that Hebrew-Israelite heritage extends far beyond the commonly recognized Jewish populations. 4-room houses unique to ancient Israelite settlements have been discovered throughout Canaan and possibly in Ethiopian archaeological sites. These architectural signatures, combined with the absence of pig bones in Israelite settlements, provide tangible evidence of distinct cultural practices that define biblical Israel. The syncretism evident in these archaeological findings mirrors the cultural blending that has always characterized God's covenant people. Modern Hebrew-Israelite communities see their awakening to biblical identity as part of Ezekiel's vision of dry bones coming to life in chapter 37. This spiritual resurrection parallels the physical regathering of Israel to their homeland, creating a dual fulfillment of ancient prophecy. The technological tools revealing these connections, from DNA analysis to archaeological techniques, serve as modern instruments of prophetic revelation. The prophetic implications extend beyond military conflict to encompass the restoration of all who recognize their calling as God's covenant people. 7 declares that God's house will be a house of prayer for all nations, while Zechariah 23 prophesies that people from all languages and nations will seek to join themselves to those who have heard that God is with them. Can you decode this sign? What happens when ancient prophecy meets modern warfare? The precision of Ezekiel's prophecy becomes even more remarkable when we examine the specific nations mentioned in the coalition against Israel. The 6 Persia, Cush, Put, Gomer, and Togarmah as allies in this end times. Persia is clearly modern Iran, while Cush represents the region of Ethiopia and Put corresponds to Libya, Gomer to parts of modern Turkey, and Togarmah to areas of Turkey and possibly Armenia. This coalition perfectly matches Iran's current alliance system. Iran maintains strong ties with Sudan, supports militias in Libya, has growing influence in Turkey, and coordinates with various regional proxies. The Prophet's 500-year-old intelligence report reads like a modern geopolitical analysis, demonstrating the supernatural accuracy of biblical. Archaeological evidence from Persian-era settlements in Judah confirms the historical context of these ancient relationships. The Hebrew-Israelite perspective on this prophecy emphasizes that God's plan encompasses all nations and peoples. The judgment on Gog's coalition isn't about ethnic superiority but about divine sovereignty over human affairs. 7 declares, "My holy name I will make known in the midst of my people Israel, and I will not let my holy name be profaned anymore." and the nations will know that I am the Lord, the Holy One in Israel. Done and evidence from First Temple period burials shows remarkable genetic diversity within ancient Israelite populations, confirming that biblical Israel was always a multi-ethnic confederation united by covenant rather than genetics alone. This diversity supports the inclusion of various communities within Hebrew Israelite identity while maintaining the distinctiveness of their calling as God's covenant people. The Mount Ebal curse tablet discovered in 2019 and dating to 1200 BC contains Proto-Hebrew text including the sacred name Yu. This tiny lead tablet measuring just 2 centimeters represents the earliest Hebrew text ever discovered and validates the antiquity of Israelite literacy and worship practices. The tablet's location at Mount Ebal, described in Deuteronomy 11:29 as a place of curses, aligns perfectly with Joshua 80. Modern fulfillment of these ancient prophecies isn't limited to military events, but encompasses the spiritual awakening occurring in Hebrew Israelite communities worldwide. The recognition of biblical identity among diverse populations reflects Hosea 1:10, which prophesies that in the place where it was said to them, "You are not my people," they will be called children of the living God. The technological revolution enabling these discoveries serves God's prophetic purposes by revealing connections that were hidden for millennia. Archaeological techniques, genetic analysis, and global communication networks are uncovering truths that unite rather than divide communities claiming Hebrew Israelite heritage. These revelations should inspire cooperation and mutual recognition rather than competition or exclusion. Ezekiel's prophecy describes not just the attack but also its supernatural. 1922 details how God will intervene with earthquakes, torrential rains, hailstones, fire, and sulfur to destroy the invading coalition. This divine intervention will serve as a witness to all nations of God's power and sovereignty, fulfilling the ultimate purpose of allowing the attack to proceed. The economic implications of Ezekiel's prophecy reveal another layer of prophetic precision that connects ancient predictions to modern realities. Chapter 13 describes Gog's motivation for attacking Israel as seizing spoil and plunder, specifically mentioning Israel's wealth and strategic position. This economic motive perfectly describes Iran's current strategy of targeting Israel's energy infrastructure and economic centers. The timing of these prophetic events correlates with Israel's unprecedented prosperity and technological advancement. The discovery of massive natural gas reserves in the Mediterranean, Israel's emergence as a global technology hub, and its strategic position in Middle Eastern trade routes all align with Ezekiel's description of a wealthy nation that becomes a target for plunder. This isn't coincidence, it's prophetic fulfillment unfolding before our eyes. What prophecy comes next? How does divine intervention change the course of human history? The aftermath of Gog's defeat, described in Ezekiel 39, reveals the true purpose behind allowing this massive assault on Israel. The destruction of the coalition won't just be a military victory. It will be a spiritual awakening that transforms the relationship between God and His people. 22 declares, "So the house of Israel shall know that I am the Lord their God from that day forward." This spiritual transformation extends beyond Israel to encompass all nations who witness God's intervention. The Hebrew Israelite understanding emphasizes that the defeat of Gog serves to reveal God's sovereignty to all peoples, not to establish the superiority of one group over others. The universal scope of this revelation reflects the inclusive nature of God's covenant promises. Archaeological evidence from the Cyrus Cylinder demonstrates how ancient Persian policies facilitated the return of exiled peoples, including Israelites, their homelands. This historical precedent provides context for understanding how modern Iran's hostility toward Israel represents a complete reversal of ancient Persian support for Jewish restoration. The irony of this reversal adds prophetic significance to current events. The genetic mosaic revealed by DNA studies of ancient and modern populations supports the Hebrew Israelite narrative of widespread diaspora and eventual regathering. Studies show Levant ancestry in Ethiopian populations, African genetic markers in some Jewish communities, and Middle Eastern signatures in various African populations. This genetic evidence provides scientific support for theories of ancient migration and cultural transmission. The role of prophecy in shaping Hebrew Israelite identity cannot be overstated. Communities that identify with this heritage see themselves as participants in ongoing prophetic fulfillment rather than passive observers of ancient history. Prophecies like I 6:1-2, which speaks of proclaiming liberty to captives and recovery of sight to, inspire contemporary Hebrew Israelite movements to embrace their calling as divine restoration. The Dead Sea Scrolls contain numerous references to the gathering of exiles and the role of various nations in end times events. These ancient manuscripts preserve prophecies about Cush and references to the restoration of scattered Israel that resonate powerfully with Ethiopian Jewish traditions and broader Hebrew Israelite narrative. The scroll's discovery in the 20th century coincided with the regathering of Israel, adding prophetic significance to their timing. Ezekiel's vision includes specific details about the cleanup after Gog's defeat, describing a 7-month burial process and the establishment of a valley called Haman Gog, meaning multitude of Gog. These practical details suggest that the prophet received a literal vision of future events rather than symbolic imagery. The specificity of these descriptions challenges purely allegorical interpretations of the prophecy. The international implications of Gog's defeat extend far beyond the Middle. 6 mentions that fire will fall on Magog and those who live in security in the coastlands, suggesting global consequences for this regional conflict. This worldwide impact aligns with the Hebrew Israelite understanding that God's plan encompasses all nations and peoples. Modern Hebrew Israelite communities see their recognition of biblical identity as preparation for their role in these end times events. The awakening of Hebrew Israelite consciousness parallels the physical regathering of Israel to their homeland, creating a dual fulfillment of restoration prophecies. This spiritual and physical restoration reflects the comprehensive nature of God's redemptive plan. The timing of these prophetic fulfillments coincides with unprecedented technological capabilities for global communication and coordination. Social media platforms, online educational resources, and virtual religious services enable Hebrew Israelite communities worldwide to connect and share their understanding of prophetic events. This digital connectivity facilitates the kind of international cooperation envisioned in biblical prophecy. Archaeological evidence from Aksumit ruins in Ethiopia reveals a civilization of extraordinary sophistication that maintained trade connections with the ancient Near East. The massive stela reaching over 100 feet in height and palace complexes demonstrate engineering capabilities that rival anything found in the biblical. Trade goods from the Levant found in these excavations support traditions of ancient connections between Ethiopia and Israel. The Beta Israel's oral traditions speak of their ancestors' arrival in Ethiopia during Solomon's era or following the First Temple's destruction. These traditions align with biblical accounts of the Queen of Sheba's visit to Solomon in 1 Kings 10 and provide historical context for Ethiopian Jewish claims of ancient Israelite heritage. Dana studies confirming Middle Eastern ancestry among Ethiopian Jews provide genetic support for these oral histories. Can you decode this sign? What role will you play in the unfolding prophetic drama? Hebrew Israelite communities in America and elsewhere interpret their recognition of biblical identity as fulfillment of prophecies about the awakening of God's people in the last days. The transformation from marginalized communities to recognized participants in biblical heritage represents a profound shift that echoes Hosea's prophecy about those who were not my people becoming children of the living God. The linguistic evidence supporting Ethiopian connections to the biblical world includes the preservation of Hebrew and Aramaic elements in Ge'ez, the ancient Ethiopian liturgical language. These linguistic connections suggest cultural transmission that could have occurred through ancient population movements or sustained contact between Ethiopian and Middle Eastern communities throughout history. Ezekiel's description of the weapons used by Gog's coalition includes specific details that have puzzled interpreters for centuries. The prophet mentions horses, horsemen, shields, bucklers, bows and arrows in what appears to be an ancient military context. Some Hebrew Israelite interpretations suggest these terms represent modern military equipment described in language the ancient prophet could understand. The prophetic timeline connecting Ezekiel's vision to current events becomes clearer when we consider the regathering of Israel as the prerequisite for this end times battle. The establishment of modern Israel in 1948 started the prophetic clock ticking, with subsequent events like the Six-Day War in 1967 and the ongoing conflicts backed proxies serving as preliminary fulfillments leading to the ultimate confrontation. Cultural resilience characterizes both ancient Israelite and modern Hebrew Israelite communities throughout their histories. Despite centuries of exile, persecution, and cultural pressure, these groups maintained their distinctive religious practices and identity. This resilience reflects the prophetic promise that God's covenant people would survive among the nations while retaining their unique calling. The synchronization of archaeological evidence with biblical chronology strengthens the historical foundation of Hebrew Israelite claims and prophetic interpretations. Destruction layers at sites like Lachish and Hazor correspond precisely with biblical accounts of Assyrian and Babylonian campaigns, providing archaeological confirmation of biblical history that supports the accuracy of prophetic texts. Modern geopolitical developments continue to align with patterns described in biblical prophecy, with nations forming alliances and experiencing conflicts that echo ancient dynamics. The recognition of these patterns by Hebrew Israelite communities provides them with frameworks for understanding current events and their potential role in prophetic fulfillment. The restoration theme that runs throughout Hebrew Israelite prophecy encompasses far more than military victory or political recognition. Ezekiel's vision of the Valley of Dry Bones in chapter 37 describes a complete transformation from death to life, from scattered fragments to a mighty army. This restoration applies not only to the physical regathering of Israel but also to the spiritual awakening of all who recognize their connection to God's covenant promises. What prophecy comes next? How does ancient wisdom guide modern understanding? The architectural parallels between ancient Israelite and Ethiopian religious structures provide additional evidence for historical connections that support Hebrew Israelite heritage claims. The layout of Ethiopian churches, with their emphasis on the Holy of Holies and ritual purity requirements, mirrors the design principles of the biblical tabernacle and temple. These architectural similarities suggest cultural transmission of religious concepts and practices across vast distances and time periods. Den evidence from ancient burial sites continues to reshape our understanding of population movements and cultural connections in the biblical world. Recent studies from multiple sites show genetic continuity between ancient Canaanites and modern populations, including some African groups. This genetic thread connects the ancient world to contemporary Hebrew Israelite communities, providing scientific support for heritage claims that were once. The prophetic significance of Ethiopia's role extends beyond the Beta Israel to encompass broader African connections to biblical prophecy. 7 speaks of gifts being brought from Cush to Mount Zion, while Psalm 68:3 declares that Cush will submit herself to God. These prophecies suggest an active role for Ethiopia and broader Africa and end times events, not as peripheral players but as significant participants in God's trade route. Evidence demonstrates that ancient Ethiopia was connected to the Mediterranean world through well-established commercial networks that facilitated cultural and religious exchange. Archaeological evidence of Roman, Byzantine, and Islamic trade goods Ethiopian sites confirms that Ethiopia was actively engaged with the broader ancient world, supporting theories of cultural transmission and population movement. The Hebrew Israelite interpretation of current events through the lens of biblical prophecy provides a unique perspective on global developments that mainstream Christianity often overlooks. The recognition that God's plan encompasses all nations and peoples, with each community playing a specific role in the larger prophetic narrative, offers hope and purpose to communities that have been marginalized or forgotten by traditional religious institutions. Ezekiel's prophecy includes specific geographical details about the battles. Location, mentioning the mountains of Israel as the primary theater of conflict. This geographical precision aligns with current military realities, as Iran's proxy forces position themselves in Lebanon, Syria, and Gaza to target Israel's mountainous regions. The prophet's ancient intelligence report continues to demonstrate supernatural. The technological capabilities that enable modern warfare also facilitate the global communication networks that are awakening Hebrew Israelite consciousness. The same satellites that guide missiles also carry messages of heritage and identity across continents, fulfilling Isaiah's prophecy about swift messengers, carrying news to distant lands. This technological paradox reflects the complex nature of prophetic fulfillment.
Hello?
Modern Hebrew Israelite movements demonstrate remarkable diversity in their expressions of faith and identity while maintaining core commitments to biblical covenant principles. This diversity reflects the multifaceted nature of biblical Israel itself, which encompass 12 distinct tribes with different characteristics, territories. Unity doesn't require uniformity but rather shared commitment to covenant relationship with God. The educational initiatives emerging from Hebrew Israelite communities serve the prophetic calling to be teachers and witnesses to all nations. These efforts help break down misconceptions and build bridges of understanding between different groups while preserving the distinctive heritage and calling that characterizes authentic Hebrew Israelite identity. The goal isn't division but recognition of the diverse ways God works through His covenant people. The climactic moment of Ezekiel's prophecy occurs when God personally intervenes to destroy the coalition attacking Israel. 1823 describes divine wrath manifesting through natural disasters that annihilate the invading forces. The prophet's description includes earthquakes, torrential rains, hailstones, fire, and sulfur, creating a supernatural intervention that leaves no doubt about its divine origin. Can you decode this sign? What hidden connections are being revealed in our time? This divine intervention serves multiple purposes beyond military victory. 23 There's that God will magnify myself and sanctify myself, and I will be known in the eyes of many nations. Then they shall know that I am the Lord. The defeat of Gog becomes a global revelation of God's sovereignty that transforms international relations and religious understanding worldwide. The Hebrew Israelite perspective on this intervention emphasizes that God's power isn't limited to one ethnic group or geographic region but encompasses all who recognize His sovereignty. The supernatural defeat of Israel's enemies serves as a witness to all nations, demonstrating that the God of Israel is the God of all creation. This universal revelation reflects the inclusive scope of God's covenant promise. Archaeological evidence from ancient Near Eastern sites reveals similar patterns of divine intervention in historical conflicts, providing precedent for understanding Ezekiel's prophecy as literal rather than symbolic. Destruction layers at various sites correspond with biblical accounts of supernatural interventions, supporting the historical accuracy of such divine actions in human affairs. The aftermath of Gog's defeat includes specific details about the cleanup process that demonstrate the literal nature of this future conflict. Nahum 16 describes a 7-year period of burning weapons and a 7-month burial process, with professional burial crews establishing a valley called Gamung. These practical details suggest that the prophet received a vision of actual future events rather than symbolic imagery. The international recognition of God's intervention extends beyond the immediate participants to encompass all nations who witness these events. 21 declares, I will set my glory among the nations, and all the nations shall see my judgment which I have executed, and my hand which I have laid on them. This global impact transforms international relations and establishes new frameworks for understanding divine sovereignty in human affairs. Modern Hebrew Israelite communities see their role in these events as witnesses and interpreters of prophetic fulfillment rather than passive observers. Their understanding of biblical prophecy positions them to help others recognize the significance of these developments and their implications for all humanity. This interpretive role reflects the calling to be a light to the nations, described in Isaiah 9. The economic implications of Gog's defeat include the redistribution of wealth and resources that accompanies major geopolitical shifts. Ezekiel's prophecy suggests that Israel's supernatural deliverance will result in increased prosperity and international recognition, fulfilling promises about the restoration of God's people to prominence among. The spiritual transformation that follows this intervention affects not only Israel but all nations who witness God's power. The Hebrew Israelite understanding emphasizes that this awakening encompasses all peoples who recognize their connection to God's covenant promises, regardless of their ethnic or cultural background. The goal is universal recognition of divine sovereignty rather than ethnic superiority. The timing of these events coincides with technological capabilities that enable global communication and coordination on an unprecedented scale. The same technologies that facilitate modern warfare also enable the rapid dissemination of information about prophetic fulfillment, ensuring that the witness of God's intervention reaches all nations simultaneously. The prophetic implications extend beyond the immediate conflict to encompass the establishment of new international relationships based on recognition of divine sovereignty. The defeat of Gog creates opportunities for cooperation and mutual understanding that transcend traditional ethnic and religious boundaries, reflecting the ultimate unity that God's plan envisions for humanity. The role of Hebrew Israelite communities in interpreting these events becomes crucial as the world seeks to understand the significance of supernatural intervention in human affairs. Their unique perspective, grounded in both biblical prophecy and lived experience of marginalization and restoration, positions them to serve as bridges between different communities and cultures in the aftermath of divine revelation. Tell us what prophecy you see unfolding in current events. Share this decoded revelation with others who need to understand their place in God's magnificent plan. What prophecy comes next? How does divine intervention reshape human history? The ultimate revelation of Ezekiel's prophecy isn't just about military conflict or political transformation, but about the recognition that God's plan encompasses all peoples, nations, and tongues in a magnificent tapestry of redemption. The Hebrew Israelite awakening represents not separation from other communities, but recognition that God's covenant promises extend far beyond traditional boundaries to include all who embrace their calling to participate in His redemptive plan. The archaeological revolution continues to unveil evidence that supports the historical foundations of Hebrew Israelite claims while revealing the interconnected nature of ancient civilizations, from the Merneptah stele confirming Israel's presence in ancient canon to the Mount Ebal curse tablet preserving the earliest Hebrew text. These discoveries validate the antiquity and authenticity of biblical traditions that form the foundation of Hebrew Israelite identity. DNA studies revealing genetic connections between diverse populations demonstrate the fundamental unity of human heritage while supporting specific claims about ancient migrations and cultural transmission. The genetic evidence doesn't create divisions between peoples, but reveals the complex web of relationships that connect all humanity to common origins, shared destinies under God's sovereign plan. The Ethiopian chapter in Hebrew Israelite history illustrates how God's plan unfolds through unexpected channels and forgotten narratives. The Beta Israel's return to Israel during operations Moses and Solomon fulfilled ancient prophecies while strengthening modern diplomatic relationships that echo biblical patterns of international cooperation and mutual recognition. Modern Hebrew Israelite movements demonstrate that authentic covenant identity transcends ethnic boundaries while maintaining distinctive calling and heritage. The diversity evident in these communities reflects the multifaceted nature of biblical Israel itself, which always encompassed various peoples united by shared commitment to the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob rather than genetic purity. The technological tools revealing hidden connections between ancient and modern communities serve God's prophetic purposes by breaking down artificial barriers and facilitating the kind of global cooperation envisioned in biblical prophecy. Archaeological discoveries, genetic studies, and historical research are uncovering truths that unite rather than divide communities claiming Hebrew, Israelite heritage. The prophetic timeline connecting ancient visions to current events demonstrates that we're living in the time of fulfillment rather than distant anticipation. The regathering of Israel to their homeland, the awakening of Hebrew Israelite consciousness worldwide, and the alignment of international coalitions described in biblical prophecy all point to the approaching climax of God's redemptive plan for humanity. The economic and political implications of prophetic fulfillment extend far beyond religious communities to encompass global transformation that affects all nations and peoples. The supernatural intervention described in Ezekiel's prophecy will reshape international relations and establish new frameworks for understanding divine sovereignty in human affairs. The educational and cultural initiatives emerging from Hebrew Israelite communities serve the broader purpose of preparing all peoples for their roles in prophetic fulfillment. These efforts break down misconceptions and build bridges of understanding while preserving the distinctive heritage that characterizes authentic covenant. The ultimate goal of Hebrew Israelite awakening isn't to establish superiority over other peoples, but to fulfill the calling to be a light to the nations that draws all humanity into recognition of divine sovereignty and covenant relationship. The Ethiopian chapter provides a model for how this inclusive mission can unfold across diverse communities and cultures worldwide. The recognition that all people, nations, and races are one under God's prophetic plan provides the foundation for cooperation and mutual support that transcends traditional boundaries while celebrating the unique contributions each community brings to the larger narrative of redemption. This unity in diversity reflects the ultimate vision of God's kingdom, encompassing every tribe, tongue, and nation. The prophetic witness of Hebrew Israelite communities extends beyond their own heritage, claims to encompass a universal message of hope and restoration for all who have been marginalized or forgotten. Their understanding of biblical prophecy as a living document that speaks to contemporary realities offers guidance and encouragement to communities worldwide who seek meaning and purpose in turbulent times. The convergence of archaeological evidence, genetic studies, and prophetic interpretation creates compelling narrative that challenges traditional assumptions about biblical history while affirming the enduring relevance of ancient texts. This convergence demonstrates that faith and science, when properly understood, complement rather than contradict each other in revealing truth about human origins and destiny. Tell us what prophecy you see unfolding in your community. Share this decoded revelation with others who need to understand their place in God's magnificent plan. The hidden chapters are being revealed, and you are part of this incredible story that encompasses every nation and people in the glorious fulfillment of God's eternal covenant promises. What prophecy comes next? The answer lies not just in ancient texts, but in the living testimonies of communities worldwide who are discovering their connection to the eternal covenant that unites all humanity under the sovereignty of the God of Israel. Iran's next move was foretold 500 years ago, but countless verses describe the glorious future that awaits all who recognize their calling in God's redemptive plan for creation. The time of fulfillment is upon us. The prophecies are unfolding. The evidence is mounting. And you, regardless of your background or heritage, are invited to be part of this magnificent story that began with Abraham and continues through every generation until the final restoration of all things under the reign of the Messiah. Can you decode the signs of your time? Will you answer the call to be part of God's prophetic plan for the nations? The ancient words are alive, the evidence is real, and the future is being written right now in you. The Hebrew Israelite legacy isn't just about one community or one people. It's about the universal calling to participate in God's redemptive work in the. Whether you trace your ancestry to Africa, Europe, Asia, or the Americas, you are invited into this covenant relationship that transcends ethnic boundaries, while celebrating the unique gifts each community brings to the whole. As we stand on the threshold of prophetic fulfillment, remember that you are not just an observer of these events, but a participant in the unfolding drama of the prophecies that foretold Iran's moves against Israel. Also speak of your role in God's plan for the nations. Will you embrace that calling? Will you be ready when the ancient words become living reality? The choice is yours, but the invitation is universal. All people, all nations, all races are one under God's prophetic plan, and the time has come to take your place in the greatest story ever told. Iran's next move may have been foretold 500 years ago, but your response to that prophecy is being written today. What will your chapter say?